and welcome to Battlefront SouthGate. I am your host, Dustin Faulkner. We are in, as I said in the previous program, times that we would never have expected. We are in times where people are using opportunities to grab at your rights, to take control of you, your freedoms, your liberty, your personal choices, not just financial issues, but also your choices of what you want to do in life, the livings that you want to make, and the other issues you want to have. As far as having anything, they want to be able to tell you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and without good reason, and without the rights to do so. And as you know, we have been dealing with this coronavirus issue. We have been dealing with people definitely being sick, people definitely being hurt out there. But it's not to the level they said it would be, is it? It's not to why they said that they needed to lock us down. Because remember, the first issue they said was we were going to have our hospital systems overrun. Like the reasons is in the past, like the IMF and all of these others made these rules with banks to keep people from running on the banks, which means that if you have money in there, it actually doesn't belong to you. If you look into your policies in all of the terms and conditions, the bank actually owns that money that's in there, so that they keep you from being able to withdraw amounts at certain times. That's why also when this issue began, you started to see people running and withdrawing cash from the banks because they were scared that they weren't going to be able to get their money. But that's what they were trying to say was going to happen to the hospitals. They wanted to say that in areas they didn't have enough of the supplies that were needed. They wanted to say that they didn't have the amount of staff that was needed, these masks that they said were needed in order to prevent this virus. And they were using the standards set forth by organizations that are unelected organizations like the WHO, CDC. You have the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation out there pushing these things. And you have the large corporations with these public-private partnerships, as we have argued about on this program, because it's corporate fascism. And that is what the Nazis were doing. This, they call us Nazis. That's what they were doing, controlling the corporations. And that's not what we do here in America. And so that's why we have been bringing on people out there fighting against it. And we are also bringing on experts. And these experts are going to help us understand what needs to happen in this world today. And joining me today is Stewart Rhodes of Oath Keepers. How's it going today, Stewart?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been one of those days raining out here, humid, really hot. It's just so much fun, not being able to go and do any other kind of regular activities, which would be normal. That we're not allowed to have those things, as some people say. I just want you to go ahead and tell people a little about yourself. Tell us a little bit of your background. Give us a good briefing on who you are, maybe some things that led up to doing what you do now, who the Oath Keepers organization is, and some things that you are focusing on doing around the country.
Okay, well, I'm the founder of Oath Keepers, and I served as a paratrooper in the Army. And then after I got out, I worked for Representative Ron Paul after college, went to college, and then worked for Congressman Ron Paul from Texas in Washington, D.C. I was D.C. staff. And then after that, I attended Yale Law School and graduated from Yale Law School in 2004. So I was at Yale in class when 9/11 hit. And when I was there, I wrote, my major paper at Yale was written about the unconstitutional behavior of the Bush administration after 9/11 in the name of fighting the war on terror. And the main focus was on enemy combatant status, the claimed authority to detain American citizens in military detention, and to try them by military tribunal instead of a jury trial, which is what the Constitution guarantees us. So that was kind of my background leading up to, after I got out of law school, I worked as a small town lawyer in Montana. And then right after that, I started Oath Keepers, and I realized that because of the pattern I'd seen of politicians of both parties, not just the left, but also the so-called right, violating the Constitution and the national security, I realized we'd crossed the Rubicon in many sense. That there, with very few exceptions like Ron Paul or his son Rand Paul, very few politicians take the Constitution seriously or take their oath seriously. And we're seeing that now in reaction to COVID-19. That's why I started Oath Keepers. I think Katrina was a big wake-up call for a lot of us. You saw gross violations of rights in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. Once again, under the excuse that it's an emergency, and the governor declared an emergency, and they were confiscating firearms in direct violation of the Second Amendment all across New Orleans. And you had police officers from all over the country who were brought in to help, who were following these unconstitutional orders to seize weapons from people who were simply trying to protect their own property and protect themselves against looters. And the excuse is that, well, this was an emergency. Well, that's exactly when you need your own firearms. So I realized all that together combined, let me know that we have to educate the police and the military about where the lines are and encourage them to honor their oath by refusing unlawful orders. And I wanted to focus on the men with the guns, the guys at the tip of the spear, because however corrupt a politician or judge might be, they really can't affect your rights unless the guy on the street, whether it's a National Guardsman or a police officer, unless they obey the orders, they can't really do much to you. So, one way to look at it is, David Rockefeller or Soros can't drive a tank. So they have to have someone to go do that for them at the end of the day. That's why I started Oath Keepers, and that's been our focus. And we've had now it's been 11 years, and our history has been, pretty strong. We were at Bundy Ranch. We stood up against those abuses. We were concerned that family would be Waco'd, because we all know what happened at Waco. And so we were there with military, both current serving and retired law enforcement and military veterans that stood up and defended that family. And we've done a lot of things ever since then, including 5 hurricanes. We've done disaster relief. We protected people against Antifa across the country at multiple events over the last couple of years. And we've also been protecting Trump supporters at Trump rallies, because the bad guys know when you go into a Trump rally that when you have to go through metal detector or Secret Service. And so they know when you come back out, you'll be unarmed. And we have some radical leftists attacking conservatives who are attending Trump rallies. So we have volunteer armed escorts of our military and police that go there and escort people back to their vehicles. So that's kind of our history. Recently, I've been in Texas for the last month, and I've been at multiple protests against the what I consider unconstitutional shutdown orders, including here in Texas with Governor Abbott. And I was there protesting against the arrest of Shelley Luther, and we just held a rally. I think we were outside the judge's house. We all went out there with Owen Schroyer, InfoWars, and protested outside the judge's house. And the next day, the Supreme Court of Texas granted the writ of habeas corpus and set her free. And we just provided security at the rally that was celebrating, it was last Saturday in Dallas, celebrating her release. So that's kind of our recent history.
Okay, well, there's a question I want to ask you really quick, because as everybody knows that our Texas governor, who's been pretty disappointing these last several months, you would have expected that the governor here, who claims to be a strong conservative and always seems to be, because we're supposed to be from a state where most people look at us like those guys are, that's the tough state. That's the state.
Yeah, don't mess with Texas, right?
Yeah, don't mess with Texas. And they're always looking at us as kind of, what are they going to do? And then what happens is our own governor doesn't do, he goes and complies to the lockdowns that were issued by our federal government. And then...
Well, just to be clear on that, what happened is Trump didn't attempt to issue any order, which is to his credit. He recognized we have, federalism. He doesn't have the authority to do anything. But he did, through DHS, issue guidelines that I think were improper, that set up this ridiculous idea of determining what is necessary or essential or non-essential. And he gave guidelines that were intended to be used by the lower officials, the governors and the states and mayors, et cetera. And that's what happened. And so Abbott took those guidelines and he did his own executive order, like many other governors did. So that's kind of the history on that. So I think Trump needs to rescind his guidelines, because they have set up the, like what I consider to be like an Alice in Wonderland, Queen of Hearts kind of paradigm, where you've got rule by decree of governors saying, well, your business is hereby declared non-essential. Under what criteria? Oh, just the governor says so. But yeah, it was shocking and disappointing to see Governor Abbott here in Texas follow the same pattern. In contrast to, like, for example, the governor of South Dakota, who did not do that. I think she is a shining star, frankly.
Right, because I thought that she was a shining star as well, because it was incredible how you've seen everybody just kind of capitulating. And then it seemed that, as you just said there about how Trump kind of threw it down, it seemed that it was like that even here in Texas, how Abbott himself sort of did the same thing. And
you're right, he did.
Yeah, and he seemed to throw it to, oh, well, that's up to the localities. But the problem with that is depending on your locality, especially there in West Texas, which we know is a brewing problem and of not just overreach, but just the infiltration that we have with illegal immigration. And I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, while we going to have a lot of voter fraud here. And the reason is I think that's also why you see, I believe it's Eric Holder's come here now. And on the Democratic side, he's leading that effort to push. And I think that's why if Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, I'd have to look back at everything. Don't take me word for word on that. But I'm pretty sure that's why he's here, is he realizes Texas is going to be on the edge of being flipped, and those organizations are here. And I think
that's why I'm here. I've spent quite a bit of time in Texas the last couple of years because I understand that this is a critical state. It's critical for a lot of reasons. And one, because the Electoral College votes. If it flips blue, your guys are done. The Republicans are completely finished. But also because of Texas's history. And I really think that Texas is critical. So goes Texas. As goes Texas, so goes the country. I think that's true. I think Colonel West, and he spoke on Saturday's rally, and I introduced myself. We chatted for a bit. I think he feels exactly the same way. That's why he's here in Texas now.
Yeah, and I think he does a fantastic job. I'm glad that you guys are out there doing that, because I think that, like I said, we're just on the verge, man. I was about to ask you, is Governor Abbott issued another order yesterday, and this is something that I think is a problem now that we've kind of given up these, we've given over ourselves to be taken over. And no,
I did not.
Well, true. Neither of us. But when I say we, I'm basically including myself with a lot of other Americans. And the reason is the American peoples that have allowed their rights to be taken and trampled.
And I think all of us are, frankly, been negligent in our duties, frankly, over decades. But what did you do yesterday? I must have missed this. Tell me what he did.
He issued another order that he's saying that all of the nursing home staffs and residents have to be tested for coronavirus. Now, I have an issue with that because I'm not going to be tested. You're not going to test me out of my will because I don't want to be tested. I don't need to be tested. I don't have a reason for you to be coming here testing me, so that you can have that on file, that maybe if I had COVID, it just kind of seems like it applies to everything, like how you have these mental health things they put on you that keeps you from getting, which they tried with the red flag laws and all of this in general, that it all is like the same. So to me, that he ordered that, and those are private organizations, right? Now, he's ordering the staff and the residents there that they have to be tested. And then he said it was Pence who ordered that. They seem to throw this back and forth, but
right. He's blaming the vice president now, right?
Yeah, and so do you think that now they have control of the companies to where it's either comply or never ever be able to open again?
Well, here let's go back to, like, George Mason, one of the founding fathers, said, "A frequent recurrence to fundamental principles is essential for the preservation of liberty." And the first fundamental principle is the governor doesn't make law. He is the executive branch, not the legislative branch. And as Shelley Luther's lawyer pointed out, when she was arrested, we were outside protesting, and he came back out without her because she was being sent to jail by the judge. But I interviewed him. It's a pretty cool, if you can pull it up, maybe you can add it to your channel. It's a pretty cool interview, frankly. But he just said, hey, the governor doesn't make law. What he should have done, what he has the authority to do, is to call a special session of the legislature in the event of a pandemic and have them make whatever law that, whatever he wants to make a new law he thinks he needs to have. He should call a special session of the legislature of Texas, and then they should do their job and make the law. And then he can sign it into law, and then we can then see whether or not it's constitutional. It's a separate question. But the threshold point is he doesn't make law. That's what's so just weird about this whole situation is you've got governors across the country making law by decree. I mean, this is what a dictatorship is. The dictator, so it's called a dictatorship. He just dictates, but he just speaks. Law comes out of his mouth. He is the law, like Adolf Hitler was the law. That's why all the soldiers in Germany swore an oath to die for the Fuhrer and to obey him unconditionally because he was the state. That's not the system we live under, and yet we have governors running around acting as if we lived in that kind of system. And you earlier talked about corporate fascism. That's what fascism is. I mean, Mussolini, the guy who started fascism, frankly, defined it as a marriage between big business and big government combined. And that's what we're living under right now. That's why, frankly, when I saw a whole bunch of big corporate executives hop up on the stage next to President Trump, I did not get into the room with fuzzies over that because this is the problem. This is what we see happening in Texas. I've been here in Hood County, Texas. This is a conservative area, and I just came from the Board of Supervisors meeting this morning, Board of Commissioners Court in Hood County, and 5 commissioners out of 5, only one, David Eagle, stood up and said what the governor's doing is unconstitutional, and he in fact proposed a resolution that would declare it unconstitutional. And what he's following up on is that the same county commissioners here in Hood County, all Republicans, had passed 9 months ago, passed a resolution declaring it a Second Amendment sanctuary, right? Along with other counties across the country have done this, declaring that they're going to stand up for people's rights. Well, here it is, a situation where people's rights are being violated by the governor, and they refuse to stand up, and they said, oh, it's not our job. That's the court's job. And we can't disobey the governor. We can't go against him. It's not our job to declare his actions constitutional or unconstitutional. We have to obey them until the court says otherwise. That was their attitude. And so it's kind of like invasion of the body snatchers. 9 months ago, all across the country, these so-called conservatives were saying, yeah, we're going to stand up and we're going to defend your rights. If the legislature passes a law that violates the Constitution, violates the Second Amendment, and the governor signs it, we're going to stand up and say no. And now here it is 9 months later, and you got these governors running around doing whatever they want, and you've got legislators down at the county level across the country all rolling over and going along with it and refusing to stand up, with very few exceptions. And so it's a strange idea that when it comes right down to it, if there's an emergency, they're willing to set aside the Constitution, and they're willing to set aside people's rights. And they've got this idea in their head that's somehow okay. That's where we're at.
Wow.
And it's Republicans too, not just Democrats.
Yeah, it's both sides. Well, we're going to go to a break really quick because we're up on a break. We need to pay some bills. But when we come back, I want to put a scenario up in front of you that just happened that I've seen going on. And I know that you have a national security background there, and I'm going to ask you about this, what you see going on. But guys, you stay tuned with us. When we come back, we're going to ask him about an issue that the billionaire John Arnold did and was involved with. And we're going to find out what Stewart thinks about this. This is Battlefront South. And welcome back to Battlefront Southgate. And we are joined by Stewart Rhodes of the Oath Keepers. But before we go to Stewart, we're going to exhort you guys on a little thing right here. And that is that we want you to go to Gatekeepers Online and check out one of our first books, which is called Social Injustice. And you've heard me talk about this even about a year before it came out how we were going to be delivering this book to you about how we are exposing the false gospel of the social justice movement and its infiltration into the church and how they are using the church to enact other things and to take over your country. And you know that that's happening. And now you have 12 authors on there coming at different areas in this social justice issue, which is causing the problem and which is being used in order to subjugate the nation by its falsehoods. And if you go there, you can check out on gatekeepersonline.com, and then you will be able to see other things on there, which are the Pastor Sam's book is coming out. You can pre-order. It's 5 Ways to Kill a Nation. And he uses the 10 Commandments there to prove what's going on and how it's being done here to destroy our nation. And also, you can go there to our store and then use the code DUSTIN, D-U-S-T-I-N, and it will give you 10% off of anything in the store. And then also, if you want to, I have these books here. You can email me at battlefrontbroadcasting@outlook.com, and $20 plus shipping and handling, and I will also sign that book to you. And then you can have a little special treat there because that signature might be important one day. We don't know. But you guys be sure to hit gatekeepersonline.com, and you also stay tuned for when bfbroadcasting.com goes live. We're going to have a lot of new shows on that network as well. Now, what we've seen here recently was a billionaire, John Arnold, was flying a plane over Baltimore, Maryland, and he was using it to surveil citizens there. And what he was doing when he was surveilling these citizens was supposedly helping law enforcement to solve crimes. Well, he didn't tell any of the leaders there, and then he didn't tell the citizens. And then some news was reported about this, and he got some kickback about this. And what happened there is a few months later, they kicked it back and forth, and he offered 3 planes to do this. And in those 3 planes, he would surveil and help them to monitor citizens. And remember, this is the same guy who's also been calling for more COVID testing. He's also the guy that developed a program where he would check criminals with this program, and it would tell whether or not they would commit crimes again. And just like when they used that program, and some bank robbers were let go there in Louisiana, they went back out, and then they robbed a convenience store, and then they tied their hands and legs and everything together while they robbed them. And on that program, they were given a score 1 out of 6, which showed that they were a low probability of committing that crime. Now, this guy's going around doing these planes that he offered to them. The city ended up approving this, Baltimore, approving this to be surveilling the citizens there so that they can get the footage and use that to solve crimes. That means they're looking at them. And as Stewart's mentioned here, he mentioned it briefly about the Patriot Act. And that Patriot Act was an intrusion upon your privacy. It was the issue of the 9/11 attacks, and all of that was used in order to grab more at your rights, because that's what they do, is they use these chaotic times to get to you. And he also has been advocating and gotten to Harris County there about how the jails everyone was sick, and all of the prisoners there were testing positive for this COVID-19. But then it shows that 96% of them weren't showing any symptoms. Now, Stewart, what do you think about is going to happen when issues like this of billionaires offering up planes and then giving it to the cities that are approving this to surveil just around the community to help solve crimes?
Well, the East Germans have what they call, they have this massive tower. Have you ever seen some footage from East Germany? They have this massive tower, because back then they didn't have the ability to do all of this. They put a tower up that looked down and watched everyone. And it reminds me of the panopticon, the idea of this, a prison system where every room in the prison is open and visible to a central tower that could see them at all times, and everyone knows they're being watched and being observed, and it controls their behavior. That's what the East Germans tried to do to their people, and that's what this is too. This is just another version of the same concept. And going back to what fascism is, this is true fascism. So you got a private party, a billionaire who's joined with government to lend his resources to just like George Soros does when he goes and promotes all over the country and donates to all kinds of campaigns. You've got rich people just like you have Bill Gates now sticking his nose in, using his money to shape policy. So long before, we've had several different rollouts. First, there was the Cold War that created a perpetual war. The national security state came out of the Cold War. This is what Eisenhower warned us against, the industrial military complex. It was never the war. It was never a stand down after World War II. So after World War II, we were on a constant war footing against the Soviet Union, and that was the excuse for all of the claimed authority for emergency powers that built up from there. And then you had the war on drugs. And the war on drugs led to, we've already got cases out there about aerial surveillance from planes by police, where they basically said that you have no expectation of privacy to anything that can be seen from the sky. So if your drapes are open, they can watch. If you're doing something in your backyard, they don't need a search warrant to observe you. They can just do whatever they want to. So the courts, including the Supreme Court of the United States, has over the years chipped away at the Fourth Amendment to the point where it no longer really exists as far as an actual barrier to search and seizure or surveillance. It's almost non-existent. And so you have very few things left. And then came 9/11, as you said. And so on top of all of the chipping away at your privacy and your rights that happened in the name of the war on drugs, and before that, the war against communism, now you've got 9/11, you've got the war on terror. Well, now you can add to that the war against the viruses. And so this is like a medical 9/11 is what we're experiencing now. And so it's always the same. All these are just different excuses that are given, different rationales and reasons to get you afraid, to make you give up more of your freedom, and to increase government power. So yeah, you should expect that. It's just no surprise whatsoever. So I think when it comes to drones and aerial surveillance and all that crap, I think you should oppose it. And frankly, that's what my shotgun is for. So that's why I like living in rural Montana out there, where I know that it's highly unlikely that I'm going to have to worry about being, surveilled and have this panopticon, all-seeing eye. It's like the eye of Sauron from Mordor. It's always turns towards you and it can see you. I see you. That's what this is like. And that's not a free society. I'm not afraid of criminals in the street. That's not my concern. My concern are the criminals in Washington, D.C., or the ones in the Federal Reserve, or the ones in international bankers, and the ones that are running around all over the world as part of the Five Eyes. Speaking about eyes, the all-seeing eyes of the CIA and the British intelligence agencies and Australia and New Zealand. Those are the Five Eyes. In Canada, those are your Five Eyes. So,
I find that interesting. And what do you think? Do you think we really need the Department of Homeland Security around here? Maybe that they're.
I don't think it's constitutional. Dr. Edwin Vieira, who's a noted scholar, Harvard graduate, he's a noted scholar on the history of the militia system, and he has a book called Homeland Security, or Constitutional Homeland Security. My bad. It's called Constitutional Homeland Security, and it's about the role of the militia. So he's correct. The militia are supposed to be we the people, bottom up, are supposed to be Homeland Security. Article 1, Section 8 talks about the militia, that Congress has the authority to provide for supplying and training the militia, and to provide for calling forth the militia to suppress insurrections, execute the laws of the Union, and to defend against invasions. Those are the three purposes for the militia being called up. And so all of those, whether it's protecting against an invasion, suppressing an insurrection, or repelling an invasion, all of that's what or executing the laws of the Union, that's what the militia should be doing. There shouldn't be an FBI. There shouldn't be a DEA. There shouldn't be a Homeland Security. It shouldn't be any of these things. It shouldn't be a CIA. All of that should be handled by the militia of the states called in the federal service, or when it comes to national defense, also by the U.S. military. That's it. All the rest of them are not constitutional, as far as I'm concerned. I think he's correct about that. And so that's what's kind of weird. Is like the founders' vision was that, like I said in the Second Amendment, right? A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms should not be infringed. The whole point of you keeping your own arms is it's natural rights, but when it comes to our structure of government, it's so you can fulfill your responsibilities in the militia, which is necessary for the security of a free state. You're not going to be secure without it, which is true, and you're not going to be free without it. Because if you don't do it, if we, the people, are not the enforcement mechanism in our states under state law, or in the federal, at the federal level under federal law, if we're not the enforcement mechanism, then what's going to happen? Then they're going to hire professionals to do it. And now you have professional police, and now you got professional Homeland Security agents that are being paid. You got professional, CIA officers now that are running around doing all this stuff. And all of that is now secret and separate from the people themselves. And that's not how the founders designed it to be. It's upside down.
See, that's also another interesting you say about how we have these professional police forces. If I've been looking around all over the nation, a lot of the problems that they've been having, that people are getting shot, sometimes of the people like that's getting beat like they did in New York there about the guy who wouldn't put the mask on. It seems to me that also in those organizations that they've lowered the standards in order to become a police officer, that now they can have past offenses that might have caused them to not be able to be in law enforcement originally, but they let go of those so that they can hire these people, and then they pay them, I guess, the low wages. But do you think that there's a concerted effort now regarding such things like that they are getting people now that they're hiring into the police force that are going to be the kind that would go against their communities, their brothers and sisters in America, to detain them? Do you think that's an effort going forward now?
Well, I think there's a systemic problem with professional police forces, and this is going back to the founders' insight about why they didn't trust standing armies, because they understood that, look at the military context, they thought standing armies were dangerous to liberty because they understood that a professional soldier whose career is in the military, his ability to support himself and his family and his children is wrapped up around obeying orders, and his prestige, his self-identity is all wrapped up in being a professional soldier. Contrast that with a militia member who is not a professional soldier, he's part-time only, like a National Guardsman. National Guard is part of the militia. So a National Guardsman who does, say he's a plumber or an electrician or whatever he does in his day job, but then he goes and does National Guard part-time. If he's given unconstitutional orders that he believes violate his oath, or that are considered unlawful under the laws of war, he can just say, go stuff it, I'm not going to do it, and what's the worst that's going to happen to him? He gets let go from the National Guard. Okay, great, he's still a plumber or still an electrician. So that's a big difference. There's an incentive there, and it's not that it's an excuse. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it. That's why the founders did not want a large standing army, because they knew that they're more likely, as they had already experienced by the redcoats, they're more likely to go along with orders that will violate people's rights. The same is true of a standing professional police force. An elected sheriff who's answerable to the people, who has a couple of deputies, but then has to rely on the people themselves as his posse. This is how it was in the founders' day. That is a different animal than a professional police force staffed with people that it's their career. And same things with the standing military. Their pension, their retirement, their paycheck, their ability to support their family, their entire identity, their prestige in the community, and their identity as a cop, that is something that is at stake if they say no. So it doesn't excuse it, but it does help explain it. It's like you just saw, I was missing the video of Officer Greg Anderson from Washington State, who's an Army Ranger veteran, who got up and said in the squad car, this what I see happening across the country is horrendous. It's unconstitutional. It's the obedience of unlawful orders that police need to stop doing because they're losing the support and trust of the American people. And he's completely correct. And he got fired for doing that, by the way. So, but the point is so there are good cops like that. And I know I've got on my board of directors, I've got a current serving sheriff deputy out of Montana who's a squared away good cop. And I've got several others. In fact, on our board of directors from Hood County is Hood County Constable John Shirley, who's retired Houston PD, who was a detective, and now he's a Hood County Constable. He's a squared away, patriot cop. So there are some out there who will refuse unlawful orders. But the problem is, as the officer Anderson said on his video, looking across the country, you can't say anymore that they're outliers that are obeying unconstitutional orders. It's happening all over the country. And like in New York, I just saw New York PD last night declaring a protest, an unlawful assembly by order of the governor and the mayor, and ordering people to disperse, and then arresting a woman who refused to disperse. And they were saying this order, this has been declared in a non-essential activity, a non-essential protest by the governor, so you must disperse or face arrest. So did they even read the First Amendment? Did they even understand it? So that's where we're at. So I think the founders had a good insight, and I think it's bearing fruit right now. We're seeing it, that because the NYPD, for example, because those officers will lose their job if they refuse, that's what they're worried about. If they refuse orders, they're going right along with what de Blasio and Cuomo have to say. And it's still wrong, but that's the danger you have with professional police forces. So the secondary question of what kind of people are being drawn to the job is it'd be wonderful if they're all like Greg Anderson or like John Shirley here. It would be awesome if they were all willing to say no and even lose their job if they have to. So there is that issue of what kind of quality are you getting. But there's that fundamental principle of the first threshold is the founders did not intend. I don't think they would have supported a massive professional police force in the United States.
Interesting. Well, we're going to go to another break here real quick. And when we come back, we're going to go into the next segment, which will be the final segment. And we will talk about maybe touching on some things that we probably need to be doing, what you see, some of the things that need to be done. And maybe we'll go into directing people how we need to get together and do some things that are necessary in order to maybe start reversing the direction that we're going. This is Battlefront South. And welcome to the final segment of Battlefront SouthGate. Again, to remind you, we are joined by Stewart Rhodes, founder of Oath Keepers. And before we left for the break, we mentioned that we were going to go into things that we needed to be doing. But first, I want to mention that everybody gave Governor Kemp in Georgia a hard time about him wanting to open the doors on the state, which, he shouldn't have shut it down to begin with, which I think a lot of these guys are walking back. But we said originally that we were hoping there would be the most successful out of all of the states. And remember, the big panic there was, and we're not discounting the virus. Keep in mind, none of us are that. We're not saying this isn't hurting people. We're not saying that it's not something to be concerned about getting.
Yes, where I'm at. I think it's a legit virus. I think it's man-made, but I think it obviously does not trump our Constitution, and it also is being used as an excuse to trample our rights. So I'm in the middle on that. I do think it's real. Some people think it's a whole bunch of nonsense. I think it's a legit virus, but I do agree with them that it's being used to violate our rights.
Well, yeah, I see, because on some previous programs, this is where I've been leading up to, is I believe that it was man-made, and I believe that it was intentionally released, because you can't go and let 7 million citizens leave your country and go abroad for a month before you're saying anything. That to me, right there, that's the same as if I go into a crowd and start firing on people.
And on that topic, I think I was very frustrated in February. I think President Trump, what he should have done is when he banned flights from China, he was on the right track. That was right. He should have done that with Japan, South Korea, Italy, I mean, anywhere else. In fact, he should have just stopped all international flights from coming back in. And he should have required returning Americans to go through a quarantine. If you want to flatten the curve, that's the way it should have been done. That would have been constitutional, and that would have been effective. And that's exactly what Israel did, by the way. Israel locked down their country, and you're not allowed into Israel unless you go through a 2-week quarantine. That was the right answer. So when they failed to do that, and President Trump failed to do that, after that, you can't try to lock down the American people. That's just not legitimate. That was when you want to get hardcore about protecting our borders, securing and locking down our country, and preventing it from entering the country in the first place, or slowing it from entering. That's how you flatten the curve, constitutionally. That was the only way, frankly. Other than that, they have no authority to do so.
Well, exactly, because what happened with that issue is that a lot of the people were coming in with the illness that or whatever that they had on them, and it was spreading to people. And,
yeah, you had returning Americans from abroad who brought it home with them.
Yeah, and it was. I think that you're exactly right. I believe that we should have had everything shut down well before some stupid bioweapon or anything's released to come into our country. Anyway, that's a situation.
As far as securing our borders, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because that's something that we did for 5 programs. We call it immigration warfare, because they flood the nations all over the place. That's what's happened to Europe. That's what's happened to all of the other countries. That's why you always have Erdogan. He's always threatening to release people into Greece and everything like that. What's he doing there? It's because he's using the people as a weapon, and they go there and they immigrate to that. So
and you mentioned earlier, so now you have potentially millions of new leftist voters in the United States.
Yeah.
They're going to let them all vote.
Right, because I don't know if you know, but back in 2009, which I think was at the time that you started Oath Keepers, right? That there was he was under the Obama administration, okay? And I can't remember who he was now, his title, but his name's Alicio Medina. And he was at a conference there. And in that conference, he was telling the Democrat leaders there how to get people and swell the ranks of the voters. And what he commanded them to do was to open the borders and to get out there and publicly fight for them to be able to be here, which is what they've done largely, because he said, as he ended that speech, because they will remember who were the ones battling on their side.
That's exactly what they did.
Yeah, and so that's why you've had people like Ilhan Omar and other people like Rashida Tlaib. All of those people wouldn't even have been elected if it wasn't for things like refugee resettlement, if it wasn't for the gerrymandering there, about how they resettled all of these voters and about how they were taking them from Mexico. And
so it's been both legal immigration and illegal, both with the same goal in mind. Like, I've got family in Minnesota, and I did a speaking tour through Minnesota for the Republican Party in Minnesota, in fact, a few years ago. And I was struck by what I was hearing. I was down in rural counties, traditionally red counties, that have been flipped blue because they have brought in so many Ethiopian immigrants that they flipped the counties over. They were like traditional conservative counties for generations, all of a sudden became voting blocks for Democrats because they were flooded with people from Ethiopia. And what about Somalia, actually? Somalia.
Yeah, because it was Somalian immigrants.
Right.
Exactly. Somalia.
So that was done intentionally. That was done intentionally by Obama to transform America.
Right, because most of them already that came over there, they came from a red-green axis regime, which was Ilhan Omar. That's her family, the Bari regime. And
right.
So they fundamentally changed everything. But, see, that's where we need to come into this. It's like, he opened the everything up, but aside from a few things like gyms, like I'm dying, dude. I need to go to the gym bad. I'm not doing very well working out at home. I'm just not. But the anyway,
Kettlebells. Kettlebells, man. That's what I use.
I'll just use these paint cans over here. How about?
Let's buy some kettlebells. They'll kick your butt.
I will. I'll try. I got my wife some. I just haven't done it.
It's big ones. You like 54 pounders, big cannonballs.
I'd probably drop it right now. But anyway, because let's go back on this nursing home issue very quick before we move on to what we need to be doing here. And
yeah, so don't forget that.
Yeah, because this is very important. And so he's and a lot of these guys are doing that is they're grabbing the National Guard and sending them in there to they're sending them in there to make sure they are doing infection control procedures. What do you think that's even a proper usage? Again, the nursing home thing, because remember what New York State was showing in their report is that nursing homes, were 18% of the infection. And I think that the reason that they were showing that there, because even Cuomo admitted yesterday or so that he was actually sending infected persons into those nursing homes and to intentionally infect them. And now they're going and saying that's a nursing home issue, which is back to the issue of what Governor Abbott's doing, Pence is doing about having these people tested. But why are we sending in National Guard to do any kind of this with? Is that even the purpose of these guys?
Well, I mean, the National Guard is the militia in the state under the command of your governor, unless they're called in the federal service. And so, I do think they have a legitimate role, constitutional role under the state constitutions and the U.S. Constitution as the militia. But it should also be the rest of us also. That's my only point. So, yes, I think they can be used for purposes like that. It's like they're used for natural disasters. Now, whether or not what the government, whether they're using the National Guard or police or anybody, whether they're doing something that's constitutional is a separate matter. But I think as long as it's constitutional, then sure, you can use the National Guard to help. It's not martial law because the National Guard shows up to help do something. That's what people have a misconception. Martial law is completely unconstitutional, by the way. But the point is that so long as it's legal and so long as it's constitutional, then yes, a governor can use the National Guard to assist, like he does when he's suppressing a riot, for example, or when he's dealing with a natural disaster. Mm-hmm. So now, is it a slippery slope? Potentially. But the threshold question is whether what they're doing is constitutional or legal in the first place. And is the governor acting under any kind of actual statute? I think the answer is probably no. That's a threshold problem. They're all just doing whatever they want by decree,
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. I'm not down with that either.
But tell you what, if I had a senior relative in a nursing home, I'd be very concerned. A lot of them are notorious for elder abuse and inadequate care. That is a problem. Right. Now, whether they're sticking like in New York, Cuomo, the government did not help the situation, made it worse. So I'm not really sure what the right remedy is. I think the most important thing probably would be that your local officials in the counties need to take that bull by the horns and deal with it themselves and make sure that people are getting proper care. I think that's important because I don't see much coming out of the states except incompetence, frankly.
Wow. Yeah, and
or malice. In the case of Cuomo, who knows what's going on inside his head? Who knows?
No, that guy's crazy. Yeah. There's something wrong with that man. Well,
like local government, though, the founders expected us to be, as Jefferson made a strong point, is that you have to be involved in your local government, and that's where it should be. Most of your laws and most of the things that affect your life should be handled at the local level, at the county level.
Well, yeah, because see, here's where we're going with that. Now, our sheriff, speaking of surveillance, as we said in the last segment, we have these red light cameras all over the nation, and we have actually been, I've had a problem with that. I've tried to warn people about we don't need those things because there's the whole prison state about how they're wanting to surveil everybody. You won't be able to go anywhere.
Well, it's a good litmus test. If you have traffic cameras in your community, you know you're being watched by Big Brother.
Right, and I believe that a lot of that comes from, it used to be Agenda 21, but now it's Agenda 2030. Those are UN standards that they take these federal funds, right? Say to like build a sidewalk or whatever, which is Tyler's done a lot of this. Tyler's huge in communitarianism. That they have a lot of public-private partnerships here. The place probably wouldn't even be as big as it is now if it wasn't for that. They give a lot of these big corporations breaks to come here, and they do whatever they want, but then they also take funds for building the trails and stuff here. And in those funds, a lot of those federal funds have Agenda 2030 requirements in there. Go look at Tom DeWeese's research. He has been railing against that for the last 20 years or so,
right,
to warn everybody.
Yeah.
But
there's a new documentary out about Agenda 1 that we've been promoting, actually, written and produced by filmmaker James Yeager.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. On that exact topic. Yeah.
Yeah, we really need to be watching out for that. Our
Right.
share.
And everyone should know the agenda. The agenda is to drive people out of the country and into the cities, to kill your rural industries like coal or logging, just destroy it, farming, make it oil and gas, all the things that you would do in a rural area, and drive them into the cities. That's the ultimate goal, obviously.
Yeah, and our sheriff put a campaign out that he wanted to use those traffic light cameras to catch criminals by going into your cars and doing facial recognition. I tried to oppose that thing. I should have been a lot better on it. A lot of people, they don't understand what's going on there. It's the whole prison state. But Sheriff Smith was a proponent of that in our city, passed that. And just before Governor Abbott issued it, where those cameras are not lawful anymore. No, they weren't lawful to begin with.
Yeah, it sounds like you need a new sheriff.
Yeah, it sounds like that. And so that's why I'm coming into asking you is,
right.
Speaking of that, tell us, with your expertise, what our people now all over the nation should be doing, need to be doing, and how to do it.
What they should be doing is they should be doing two things at once. One track you can call a political track, which is to purge out all of the rhinos, to purge out all the oath breakers, make sure you got people in political office that will actually understand the Constitution and will actually follow it. That's ground zero. And your county level, the sheriff is a critical office, but so as you're now seeing, so is your commissioner's court, or they call county commissioners in other parts of the country. It matters because you saw, I've seen this across the country, you've seen county commissioners who have also gone along with violating people's rights in the name of whether it's the war on drugs or the war on terrorism or now the war on COVID-19. So you've got to make sure you've got Constitution. So what I see, let me be blunt, what I see across the country, and most of the rhino Republicans, most of the Republicans I've seen at the county level across the country are businessmen who care most about business, don't understand the Constitution, and don't give a rat's behind about it either. They just don't care about it. All they care about is making money and go along to get along. Or if they do care about anything else, their default is pro-law enforcement, pro-national security state. And so they'll go right along with like traffic cameras and surveillance and draconian measures in the name of fighting the war on terror, fighting the war on drugs, or whatever. So their default is to go right along with all of that and have no breaks whatsoever when it comes to police activities. So I think you got a serious problem. You got to purge them out. And before the COVID-19 hit, I was in Virginia for a month advising a lot of the militia groups that were popping up in Virginia in reaction to their governor, going full on totalitarian. And I was there for the big rally on June 20th in downtown Richmond, but then I stuck around and helped train and organize militias. And they're coming to the same insight. They had, reaction to the governor, men spontaneously at the county level coming together, veterans and non-veterans, and forming militias, which I think is great. And they had a 600-man militia muster that I attended that was just awesome. But the same people that organized those militia musters were trying to get their county supervisors to give them some kind of, I wouldn't say permission, but to recognize them as, we're going to go ahead and form a militia at the county level, and we want participation by the county government to recognize them as the official militia of the county. I think that's great. But none of the counties would do it. And even the Republican-controlled counties would not do it because, that's just too far out there. We don't want to do that. And so they realize that they have got to, at the same time that they're forming these militia units, they've got to also be a block of voters to purge out the weenies and the rhino businessmen and put in real patriots. And that's exactly what the Founding Fathers went through. They had the same issue. They had to go through and take over their town councils and their county level government and put patriots in charge to get things done. So I would say this: you need to do two things at once. You need to recognize your responsibility, each one of you, the men out there in particular. You have a duty and responsibility to be the militia of your town, of your county, ready and willing to answer the call if called in the federal service. That's what your duty is. What that means is you should be armed and you should be trained. You should be trained to be an infantryman. So I know you happen to have some infantry veterans that are right there in your area who are part of Oath Keepers and part of other groups that you should be tapping into. And every single one of you out there, you take that responsibility on. Do you have a rifle? Do you have an AR-15? Do you know how to use it? Do you know how to motion communicate? Do you know how to take care of your buddy? Combat casualty care. Those are the most important ground level skills you need to have. And then you need to form yourselves into neighborhood watches, and then town watches, and then county watch, and eventually, hopefully, an official militia under your county government's approval, if you could ever get it. But don't wait for them. But meanwhile, you need to be putting patriots in charge. I would start with the sheriff's office. It sounds to me like you needed a sheriff, and you make sure that whoever the sheriff is, has got to be a patriot. Because, like, for example, with Shelley Luther, the hairdresser, the salon owner in Dallas, when the judge acted like a dictator from the bench and tried to punish her for standing up to an unconstitutional law, he directed the sheriff of Dallas County to arrest her, and the sheriff did it. Now, if the sheriff was a constitutionalist, the sheriff could have said, I'm not going to do it. Then what's the judge going to do? He can't do it himself. Is he going to get off the bench and go try to cuff her? He's not going to do it. So who your sheriff is matters. So those are the two things I would say at the same time you got to do is prepare yourselves. You should all be growing gardens. You should all be storing food. You should all be being prepared and to be prepared to be resilient and independent and be able to back each other up at the local level and take care of each other. And that takes getting off your butt and getting to know your neighbors. The secret squirrel prepper that doesn't want to let anybody else know he's got food storage and want to talk to his neighbors is a fail. That's not going to be survivable. In any kind of scenario that happens, that person is simply storing away supplies for MS-13 or any other gang that comes raiding through his neighborhood. They're going to take that stuff and kill him and his family and just take his supplies. So the answer is the militia. The answer is you getting off your ass and taking your responsibility seriously. And I think the first threshold thing you should do is a neighborhood watch or a community watch. And the next thing I would do is go to your church and establish a church security team, and also encourage your church to have a food store for the members, and so that the church can act as a refuge or relief center in time of emergency. You should have emergency heat, water, power, and food storage. If your church can't act as an emergency shelter in time of need, then your church is dropping the ball and not doing what they should be doing. And if you don't have a security team to secure it, how are you going to protect it either? So security is essential, and the founders were right. A well-regulated militia is necessary, not an option. You can't say, we don't really need that. It's necessary for the security of a free state, and that starts with you.
Right. See, I was reading a book not too long ago. It was about the collapse of Argentina, and when they went into their depression.
By Fairfowl? I think his guy's name is Fairfowl.
Yeah, that's the book I have. Yeah. And he recommended every bit of that. He said that because a lot of us talk about we're going to go into these areas and we're just going to be alone. But he said that one of the bigger problems was that the guys who are going through robbing everything can just go into the property and there's nobody around you to help you fight against that. And if you have a squad of people coming at that excellent book. I'd recommend that to anybody. He was absolutely right on a lot of points.
And so a good historical lesson to look at is the experience of the Rhodesian farmers and the South African farmers. Because you're talking about rural areas. An isolated rural farm or prepper retreat is absolutely vulnerable. A squad of guys can take it down. I mean, you're one Molotov cocktail away from losing all your crap. So you've got to, like they do, they set up a response system and an alert system where they use air horns and radios to alert and flares to alert their neighbors that they're being attacked by terrorists. And then the neighbors would respond. And the neighbors also were part of they would have an established neighborhood or rural area patrol. Men that would go out, everyone did their time. They'd go out and they'd be like a squad of men that are just roving around ready as a quick reaction force. But even if they didn't have them nearby, your neighbors would hear the horn or see the flare, and they would come running, and they had already prepared how they were going to respond and back up that homestead. And then the terrorists were the ones that ran away. They had to, or they'd be killed. So they only had like 3 or 4 minutes to attack a farm before they had to run off. If you don't have any kind of mutual aid system like that set up, then a looting band of land pirates, as I call them, can take their time and lay siege to you. I don't care what your defenses are, they will eventually get through them. They'll just lay siege. It's not going to work. You got to have, so out there in rural areas, I would say, get together with your neighbors, put together a ham radio network that you can all talk to each other, but have a backup. So like an air horn and flares, things like that, so that your neighbors know you're in trouble and they can come help you.
It's very difficult because you've run into this. It seems that everybody before this social distancing pretty much was doing that anyway, because it's not the same as things used to be. People, like, you can live around neighbors forever and never even talk to them. Nobody talks to one another anymore. Like, now I'm not like that. As soon as I got here, I got the deputy constable lives by me. I got a huge real estate agent guy who lives across from me. And I'm not that I'm in people's business, but they already know I'm watching, because as soon as anything happens, I'm talking to them about it, trying to get them to know that. And because I want them, and I'm trying to tell them, I'm like, hey, when I first went there, I was like, look, my wife's going to be staying at home alone because she stays at home, homeschools the kids. Could you get together with your wife and everybody to make sure they're all watching out for each other? I'd really appreciate that, because that was always a concern of mine. With being able to, I should be able to run to my neighbor and vice versa. We should be able. There's nothing that goes on in this area that I don't see. I'm always watching. My situational awareness is keen, because that's something that I've always taught my wife. Still got a lot of growing to do, but you can't. I gave a speech on this about a year or so ago to a group, and I was asked them about what they saw before they even come into the meeting, and none of them could point out anything. I could point out every car that was there, the license plate. I knew by just the memory of who parked there, and I knew by how many times that person parks there every time I'm there, where they park, how they park, and I knew that by doing that, what's going on, and if anything is going to be out of the ordinary, I would be prepared for that. And that goes into a lot of your active shooter situations.
Right. So you do the baseline of normal activity, and you'll be able to see anything that varied from it. Yeah. Like you said, awareness is the first step. You got to have it.
Right. And well, I got one more thing before you go, and then I got another question after that. First of all, your organization, Oath Keepers, could you please tell us please let us know the standards of, if anybody would like to become a part of that, what entails of being able to do that, how they can join Oath Keepers.
So our website is oathkeepers.org, and we are both military, police, current serving and former, EMTs, firefighters, search and rescue. That's the core of our membership, but we also allow people that are not prior service to join as an associate member. And the reason why is because, like I said before, we're all supposed to be the militia. And so we see, like I was a airborne infantry, so I see my obligation and duty is to pass on my skills, my MOS. You've got your communications in the Army, so you've got a duty and responsibility to pass on what you learned. We look at it like this, that our skill set that we learned in the military belongs to the American people. They paid for it, so I think they own it. And so my duty is to make, my charge is to pass on my infantry skills to all of my members who are not prior service, who don't have those skills, or to cross-train with guys like you. You teach me something about radios, I teach you more about how to move, shoot, and communicate. So that's what we do. So we have a training program in Oath Keepers. We are now, in fact, we just launched this today. In fact, we are now bringing all of our communication, and we'll be doing online training on our Discord server. So when someone joins Oath Keepers, they'll get access to that Discord server, which is a much freer place to be than Facebook, for example. And so we'll be doing, as we go, online training, both written and in videos, and also in-person training. We're going to establishing training standards across the country that we are going to then give our members, here's the standard, here's what you need to do to train for it, and then here's how to train with online resources, but then also we want them to test in person so that we know they meet the standards. And hopefully what we'll wind up with is that if we ever react to something, whether it's local or state or across the country, we know that if I see a patch on a guy's shoulder that says, tactics 1, level 1, I know that he knows what he's doing at that level 1 basis, or communications level 1, whatever it is. So the critical skill sets that we train are security and tactics, and of course that involves how to shoot, who shoot and communicate. Emergency medical, and the first level for that is combat lifesaver. Emergency communications, and then emergency like preparedness or engineering, and then also intelligence. And then you can throw in wilderness survival is in there too. But patrolling and wilderness survival, tracking, all of those are critical skill sets. Fieldcraft, you can call it fieldcraft, of how to survive in the woods. All that'll be part of our training. But I think that's what you should be doing in your local groups. You identify your veterans that have those skill sets, or your skilled hunters and outdoorsmen. They should be cross-training everyone in how to do that anyway. But that's our mission, is to help people do that.
That's incredible. That's a really great organization that you have there. And are there people able to financially support your organization if they choose to?
You bet. They can go oathkeepers.org and donate. And we also have a gear store. They can go and right now we're selling body armor, in fact, and plate carriers. They can go there and buy some of those, or they can buy, some Oathkeeper swag, and that helps support us too. Or they can just do a donation if they want to. But we do encourage you to join. Frankly, I'd rather have you join as a member than just donate money. I'd rather have you get, on our server and start talking to other people in your area, and hopefully organize training groups. What I want to see, frankly, is whether they're 3%ers or call themselves whatever militia they might be in. I want to see all of us train together. So in your county, for example, in Smith County, there should be a Smith County training team, a training group that gets together. And I don't care what group you're in, just train together. And out of that should come like the concerned citizens of Smith County that look at all the politics and make sure they got constitutionalists, running for office. Run your own people if you have to. And unite all the different groups out there. Set aside your turf battles and all that, and train together and focus on your county together from the grassroots up. Because I don't care what group you're in. I'll train with you guys. As long as you're a constitutionalist, as long as you're not a communist, as long as you're not a white nationalist who wants to destroy our Constitution also, then I'll train with you and I'll help train you. That's really the only criteria. And if we can't train felons either. It's unfortunate that, I know some guys out there are good people that have a felony record, but we just can't do that. Not when it comes to firearms.
That's understandable. Well, I think everybody should check that out and go to his website. I think that he's got a really good group there. I'd like to see something like that grow really large, especially in my area. I got one more thing before you go.
Sure.
Now, I know that we need to be doing as you stated earlier, but I'm under the impression that people are afraid of loss on doing any of these issues. And remember, we've talked about what Ben Franklin said about these things.
Right.
But like me, what I do with this, it was something I kept secret kind of in my employment. I didn't want it to be out there on my resume because I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to succeed where I was, and we all know what happened there. But do you, for the people that, if perhaps you think this as well, that are afraid to get out there and do something and make their stand on like in social media, or if there's anything that would get because I use a lot of LinkedIn and I've been posting my material there, which I know is going to definitely not be very big on me getting a job with a lot of people now, but this is what I do, and this is where it needs to go because people need to know. People need to know this information. That's why we started this.
Right.
But what would you say to those people out there who are afraid of losing everything to stand against this.
Well, you'll lose everything if you don't. If you don't stand up and do what the founders expected of you. They expected you to be at town hall meetings, to stand up and speak out. They expected you to call out people that are violating your rights. That's what they did. So if you're not willing to do that, you're going to lose everything. Like Ben Franklin said, those who give up essential liberty for proposed or possible security deserve neither and will get neither. If you don't stand up and do the right thing now, then you're going to lose everything anyway, because we're being driven towards a big brother nightmare. I mean, we're talking compulsory vaccines and biotracking and all that crap. If you're not mentally prepared and spiritually prepared to stand against it, then it's going to roll right over you, and you're going to lose all your freedom and your property too. They're going to drive you out of the country and into the cities. That's what they want to do. And it won't be some kind of utopia city. It's going to be a friggin' third world hellhole with them at the very top. You can go look at any of the third world countries and the juntas that own and run them. That's what we're looking at. So you got to stand up. Be an actual American. A real American is like Sam Adams or John Hancock or Patrick Henry. They stand up and they do what's right, and it's duty is ours, results are God's. That was the motto that John Quincy Adams, spoke of, and that was the attitude of his father and his uncle. So you've got to stand up and do the right thing, because what matters at the end is whether or not your children are free and whether your grandchildren are free, and future generations are relying on us. And every man who fought from Concord Bridge all the way forward through all the wars this country has fought, they will all be for nothing if you're afraid to stand up and open your damn mouth and speak out and do what's right now. You might as well go piss on their graves in Arlington. They're all over the world, because you're not defending what they sacrifice their lives to defend. I think it's disgusting. And I think people need to put that out of their head, any kind of concept of why I can't open my mouth or I might lose my job, because that is cowardly, frankly. And it's something that you got to just purge out of your soul. If you've got any of that left inside of you, purge it out. Dig it out of your soul. Because on your deathbed, you look back and you look at your grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the question that's going to cross your mind is, did I do what I need to do to keep them free? And the answer will be no if you don't stand up now. And I don't care what your money is. I don't care what your job is. Nothing is worth losing your soul over that.
Wow. I can't even say anything other than that. Usually I would go right into exhorting people. I'm not here in a little second.
Stand up, right?
Yeah, stand up.
Man, for crying, all you men out there, be a friggin' man.
Yes.
Man stands up, and he when he sees something that's going wrong, he stands up and speaks out, and then he takes action.
Okay, well, Stewart, I'd like to thank you for coming on the broadcast today. It was been very informative and very motivational for the information that you gave us, and for the story behind Oath Keepers, and also for the exhortation that you just gave to those out there who aren't doing what they're supposed to. Thank you very much.
You bet, man. Good time. I appreciate it. And anytime I want me back on, let me know.
I would love to have you back. It would be great. Would love to have you keep going. You present a lot of information for everybody, and it's needed.
Oh, Austin, May 23rd. There'll be a protest in Austin to defend the rights of Texans. So if you're in Texas and you want to come down to the Capitol, look for announcements on Facebook for May 23rd. And the ladies from right there from East Texas, Freedom Coalition, are helping put that on. They're one of the coalition groups.
Yeah, that's where I was getting mixed up when we were speaking earlier. So the 23rd is the Texas one, and then the
Saturday,
upcoming other conference with the American Conservative Movement is going to be at the end of the month as well. Well, with that said, everybody, I want you to keep in mind that you have a responsibility to get out there and to protect your freedoms, because you don't deserve them if you're not willing to protect them. You do not know the amount of sustenance that you get from serving your country. And that's because you're doing it for someone other than yourself. And a lot of you guys are always talking about doing this for that and servant leadership. Well, there's nothing better than getting out there and fighting for other people's rights. Because if you're fighting for these other people's rights, which are your God-given rights, you're going to be doing what was told on the program today. You can do this. Stop being afraid. Stop being cowardly. You have no reason to be cowardly because there are people who will back you up, such as Stewart. There are people who will back you up, such as me. I will stand behind you. I won't stand behind you. I'll stand right there at the front lines with you. That's what we do here. We're not just going to get on here and broadcast and talk about it. We're going to be there in the trenches with you because you need to be in the trenches, because if you're not, we won't have what we have even a little bit today in the future.
Amen.
Guys, it has been a pleasure. You stick with us. Come back with us to the Southgate. Come back with us in this fight. Let's do what we're supposed to do. Southgate out.